We talk about Britain, we talk about the UK, but what about England itself? We tend to think of it as this ancient, permanent fixture on the map, like it's always been there. But the truth is, England wasn't just born, it was forged. And its creation story? Oh, it's a brutal, chaotic saga of invasion, betrayal, and a desperate, desperate struggle for survival.
So let's just dive right in. When did England actually begin? I mean, was there some single day, a flip of a switch where, boom, a bunch of warring territories suddenly became one single kingdom? Well, if you ask a historian, they'll probably point you to one specific year, 927 AD. But here's the thing. That clean, simple date, it hides a messy, violent, and frankly, a way more interesting story. And this story, ironically enough, begins with the total collapse of an empire.
Okay, so let's set the scene. It all starts in the ruins of the Roman Empire. When the Roman legions packed up and left Britain for good, they didn't just leave behind some cool roads and walls. They left a massive power vacuum. And that left the native Britons totally exposed and vulnerable.
So, the Britons' solution? Well, it ended up creating an even bigger problem. See, they were getting hammered by attacks from the north, so they hired some mercenaries, these guys called the Anglo-Saxons from mainland Europe, to fight for them. And hey, the Saxons did their job. They beat back the invaders, and then they kind of looked around, liked what they saw, and just decided to take over themselves. I mean, it was a classic, brutal betrayal that would basically define the next few centuries.
And this takeover didn't lead to a single unified nation. No way. It led to, well, this. A complete patchwork of rival kingdoms, what we now call the Heptarchy. Now, names like Mercia, Northumbria, and Wessex might ring a bell, but you have to understand they were basically separate, often warring countries. This was not England, not even close. It was just a collection of competitors, all on a collision course with a brand new threat coming from the sea. And yep, that threat came from the sea. The Viking Age didn't just start. It absolutely exploded onto the scene. It unleashed this storm of violence that threatened to wipe the Anglo-Saxons off the map entirely. And the shock of their arrival was profound. I mean, in 793, Vikings just walked in and sacked the sacred monastery at Lindisfarne. For the Christian Anglo-Saxons, this was just unthinkable. Attacking an unarmed, holy site, it showed a level of brutality they were completely, utterly unprepared for. It was a sign of a terrifying new kind of war. And man, were they effective. Just look at this timeline. It shows you just how fast the Anglo-Saxon world completely fell apart. 870, East Anglia is gone. 4 years later, 874, Mercia falls. A year after that, Northumbria is seized. In less than a single decade, almost everything was gone. The Vikings set up their own territory called the Danelaw, an area where Danish, not Anglo-Saxon laws, were in charge. It really looked like the whole Anglo-Saxon experiment was over. Only one major kingdom managed to hold out, Wessex, down in the south. It was the absolute last bastion of Anglo-Saxon authority on the entire island, and it was led by a king who would become a legend, Alfred, later known as Alfred the Great. The very idea of England was hanging by a single fragile thread. But this was the turning point, pushed right to the brink of annihilation. Wessex didn't just defend itself, it went on the attack. And in this desperate last-ditch fight for survival, a new, unified identity, an English identity, began to form. So after Alfred's death, his kids kept the fight going with this brilliant pincer movement. You can see how it worked here. From the south, you had his son, Edward, pushing up from Wessex. And then, from the north, you had his incredible daughter, Æthelstan, the Lady of the Mercians, pushing down. This coordinated assault by the brother-sister duo started to systematically take back all that Viking-held land. The final piece of this puzzle was put in place by Edward's son, Æthelstan. So when the Viking ruler of Northumbria died, Æthelstan saw his chance. He marched his army north, took control of the city of York, and, for the very first time, all the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms were united under one king. This is that moment historians point to, the birth of the Kingdom of England in 927. But here's the thing. Declaring a kingdom is one thing. Actually holding it together, that's a whole different ballgame. The new English crown sat, well, uneasily, and the unity that Æthelstan had just built was incredibly fragile. In fact, it was about to be tested immediately. Yeah, the ink was barely dry on the new maps,
Æthelstan's brand new kingdom immediately provoked a massive backlash. A huge coalition of his rivals got together with just one goal: to shatter it completely. So just 10 years after creating England, Æthelstan had to fight to save it. At the Battle of Brunanburh, this grand alliance of Scots and Vikings came down on him. The battle was immense, it was bloody, but Æthelstan's victory was total. And this was more than just a military win. Brunanburh really forged a sense of shared Englishness, an identity born from surviving against all odds. But even that wasn't the end of it. Just look at this table. It shows the pure chaos after Æthelstan died. Northumbria was lost to a Viking from Dublin, then retaken by the English, then lost again to the infamous Eric Bloodaxe from Norway, before finally being reclaimed. This constant back and forth really shows you just how tenuous that English hold on unity really was. So if war forged this kingdom, what finally made it stick? Well, the answer wasn't more fighting. It was something else entirely. It was a shift from conquest to governance, and the creation of a lasting state that was built not on battles, but on peace. And this brings us to Æthelstan's nephew, King Edgar, who, fittingly enough, became known as Edgar the Peaceful. His whole reign was built on these three pillars you see here: peace, unity, and order. See, Edgar understood that a stable kingdom needed way more than just military might. It needed the buy-in of all its people. And this was his masterstroke. Instead of trying to force Anglo-Saxon law on everyone in the former Danelaw, Edgar did the exact opposite. He actually respected the customs and the laws of the Danes living in his kingdom. It was an incredibly wise move. He was creating unity not by crushing people, but by earning their consent. So when you think about it, it's a fascinating paradox, right? The English state was born from centuries of just brutal warfare against the Britons, between the Anglo-Saxons themselves, and against the Vikings. But maybe its survival, its ability to actually endure, came from that one moment a king chose peace, order, and respect as the real foundation for a truly united nation. It kind of makes you wonder, what does that tell us about how nations are really made?